Hello everyone, welcome back to another exciting and inspiring episode of On Location with Zara Durrani, produced with the support of TELUS STORYHIVE. I hope these interviews, these segments, these guests we've been bringing to you have been inspiring you, and each conversation is leaving you feeling empowered and motivated. Joining me today is someone we just happened to catch him before he left town for Italy. He lives a very exciting life. He's lived around the world, and he also happens to be the vice president of boxing in Canada, British Columbia?
In BC.
In BC.
Yeah,
in BC.
Yeah.
So we're just a little bit into fitness. I'm talking about none other than Tariq Abdulrahman. Welcome.
Thank you, Zara. Thank you for having me along. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Tell us what's happening in Italy.
So Italy is actually, I'm very fortunate to be like involved in any way. You know, this it's the first phase of the Olympic World qualifiers for boxing. Each continent has had its qualifying rounds, and the winners of that have already qualified for the Olympics. So this is like the second round possibility for some people who didn't quite kind of make it. Mm-hmm. So Canada obviously is a North American country, and the Pan American Games have already happened. So we have a couple of qualifiers there. So this is a final opportunity for some people around the world to all meet and box off against each other to go to Paris.
Mm-hmm. So obviously with your accent, you were not born in Canada.
I was not born in Canada.
Okay, so take us back. I like to add, this is kind of like the James Lipton Inside the Actors, except you're not an actor. We do bring a lot of actors on this pink couch. Mm-hmm. But I would love to hear your story. What brought you to Canada? Where were you born?
So I was born in a really...
That's my dog, Loki, in the background.
Bless. I was born in the Kingdom of Bahrain. It's a very small island off the coast of Saudi Arabia. And my dad is from Bahrain and my mum's from Scotland. I was born there, grew up there for a few years, and then moved to Scotland when I was about 11. And was in the UK for a number of years. Went to university there, and then moved back out to the Middle East for a couple of years, and then met my ex, who's from Canada, and we moved here about 6.5 years ago. And yeah,
you fell in love with Vancouver.
In love with Vancouver, in love with
the mountains, the ocean.
It's too easy.
Yeah. I was living in Paris for a couple of years, and I love Paris. Mm-hmm. I love London. I love like the European lifestyle, the architecture, but there was something so special about coming back home to Vancouver.
Definitely.
That I could really, obviously the view here, you know, I feel really blessed, but I haven't lived here for the last many years. But coming back here, I'm like, this natural beauty, no matter how many galleries I go to, which I really appreciate, but there's something special when you go up in the mountains, or even when it's snowing. I love like walking down on the seawall and like going for a walk. It's just so serene, and we have this gift right here.
Yeah, no, it's BC is a very special place. Vancouver is, you know, one of my favorite cities in the world. I'm lucky to travel quite a lot with my work. I get to go to a lot of places around the world for work and pleasure, but coming back to Vancouver is always very special. Even within Canada itself, you know, I was recently in Winnipeg, and it's a great town, but you know, when you come back into BC and you see the mountains and the sea, and just like, wow, like we're very blessed.
And you weren't always into boxing, and this is just. No. You studied law.
I did.
Share that with our viewers.
I studied law, and I practiced for a few years out in the UK and in the Middle East. You know, but I don't think I was a very good lawyer, to be honest with you. But the intrinsic rewards kind of weren't there, and I wasn't really passionate about that career. So after a few years, I decided to kind of go into coaching. Very
But
casually.
Were you into like boxing and fitness and all of that?
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
I've always been a competitive athlete. I've competed in boxing, in soccer and track. You know, kind of my whole life. I've been a high performance athlete for a few years, and so kind of, you know, I've always been, you know, around that those types of people in that kind of culture, competitive culture, kind of pushing yourself, having targets and goals, and you know, trying to, you know, whether it's a team sport or a solo sport, I've always been involved. So the transition was very natural to go back into sports, and I went back in, very casually to take a year off, kind of a bit of a break from my career, and kind of figure out what I wanted to do. But almost immediately when I started, coaching boxing, I was like, this is where I want to be. So, yeah.
But it's almost like a movie. That's such a big shift of like going from behind the desk.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a similar story. A couple of years ago, like during COVID, coming back from Paris, lockdown, our film industry, it's like right now it's just me and Julian behind the camera. But normally on a film set, you have hundreds and hundreds of people. So for me, it was like, oh my goodness, like what's going to happen with my work? So I decided to get like a day job.
Right, yeah.
In an industry,
right.
In your industry.
In the legal industry.
And very soon, I'm very grateful for the positions, and it gave me that sense of safety and security that you sometimes need that. And I was like, okay, this is adulting, no more. I've been living an artist, like that life, and okay, this is what the people do in my age range. And then very quickly, I would say like a year and 6 months in, I had just turned 40, and I was sitting there looking at the view, and I had opened my computer, and I was like, this is not me, and this is how people get sick. This is how people get diseases in their bodies when they don't follow their natural instinct, when they don't listen to what their body's trying to tell them. That, because what people are taught is that if you have this job, you get 2 weeks or XYZ benefits, and then you can go have fun, on those 2 weeks.
I remember those days.
Or when you're like 65, and I remember in law, like at the law firms, it's like you're expected to work on the weekends and evenings, and that's just expected. And I was not even a lawyer.
Yeah, no, it's it was,
no bueno.
Yeah, definitely no bueno. I mean, it's the same. It's the same motivation for me. I remember kind of looking around the office and thinking like, wow, is this it?
Yeah.
It was, I studied hard, and I had a very supportive family who, supported me to go, get through my master's in law school and things like that. And, but obviously when I looked around and I saw, the kind of the senior partners in the firm in their kind of mid-60s kind of retiring, I'm like, I don't know if these people are happy, and I don't know if they're fit and healthy, and I don't know if they enjoy the little things in life because they don't have the time. And I think to practice something like that, you have to be very, very passionate about it. You have to be very dedicated, and I guess I just wasn't. I always enjoyed moving my body. I enjoyed interacting with people in the arena of fitness. I enjoyed competitive sports. I enjoyed, success, and in that
the
arena.
adrenaline,
the adrenaline, and
and
hitting your goals, and with
I
law,
think,
it's a little bit different.
And I think it depends on what motivates you in life, and of course, natural ability and gift and talents, and I have many friends who are in that profession or studying to become lawyers, and they're great at that, or in that field, or in marketing. I knew that was not for me. So when I heard your story, I was like, oh, that sounds really familiar, because not a lawyer, but I was around them and, helping them like organize trips to like different places, or they're traveling around the world. I was like, man, I was doing that stuff. I'm not supposed to be the one organizing this. I'm supposed to be the one doing this.
Yes, exactly.
The one out in the field. And
absolutely.
So I think it takes a lot of that trust to make a move like that.
Trust and faith, and a bit of submission. These are important things. There are times where, I miss having, a good salary and like, benefits and things like that,
The 4 weeks paid vacation.
Yeah, 4 weeks is a lot. I got 2. Actually, I got 10 days.
I negotiated 4.
Yeah. That's good. You're good. You're a much better lawyer than me. When COVID hit, obviously boxing stopped. Competitive sports stopped. So the industry, the fitness industry ground to a halt, actually. And even at that point, you're doing what you can. And I think if I wasn't so passionate about it, and if I didn't enjoy my work so much, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And there are times, living in Vancouver is expensive, as you'll know, and I have a good client base and a good clientele that outside of the competitive aspect of coaching that kind of keeps it alive, which I really appreciate. But you know.
I never. I don't think I ever took any of your classes.
Not yet.
But I saw not yet.
Not yet. There's time.
I was trying to enroll you to be like, hey, you should be my trainer when I saw you teaching people in the summertime.
I know.
But I saw you. I was going for a brief amount of time, and I got all the nice benefits from the law firm at Equinox. But I saw your name, and I was like, oh, and then I saw your credentials, and I'm like, okay, this class must be really good. But I don't think I ever got a chance to get to your classes.
Well, I'm coaching there later on tonight. So
okay. No, I left Equinox.
Okay. I can give you a guest pass. Don't worry.
I'm not paying that kind of money.
I know a guy. I'll get you a guest pass.
Okay, great.
But yeah, no, I mean, the commercial aspect of things, you know, working with non-competitive athletes, I'm equally passionate about, you know, like seeing people, you know, light up when they learn, you know, like, and for me, somebody asked me a while ago, you know, what do you really enjoy about it? And was it, you know, seeing athletes be successful? Yeah, sure. It was, you know, the adrenaline of, you know, being in a combat sport, sure. But ultimately, I think I really like teaching. You know, I really like, you know, sharing knowledge. I really also like learning. You know, I'm a constant student. You know, when I have the amazing opportunity to work with the national team here, which is, it's not very often, but
which is something to be really proud of.
Very, I'm very honored.
Yeah,
I'm
and
very
I feel like this was really timely because I was just thinking, I'm like, okay, who is going to be, and I keep running into you, and then I'm like, okay, I know he's doing something. Let me go check out his Instagram. Let me go Google him and see what I'm like. You would make such a great guest.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. No, I've been very fortunate. You know, I worked with the Kingdom of Bahrain national team for a couple of years, you know, up until about a year and a half ago. So I've had that kind of international experience already, and representing your own country is amazing, and getting to travel with them and work with athletes. And that's actually where I started coaching, was in Bahrain. So I have a deep connection to the boxing.
And what kind of countries would you travel to?
Everywhere. I have been everywhere.
Wow.
All over Europe, Asia, you know, North America, South America, Central America. You know, we've been kind of everywhere. It's mainly Europe. Is kind of the point that we go to, but I go down to the States quite a lot. But yeah, no, the opportunity to work with, you know, as a junior coach, I'm still, you know, learning my trade. I'm still a student of the game as well. You know, you know, you constantly kind of learning and keeping yourself, you know, at the kind of front of things, and being humble enough to see the perspective of other coaches and how other people do things, and employ that with your athletes, and you know, being offered any opportunity, even just to hold the spit bucket for the national team here, is a great honor, you know. And so I'm going over to Italy. It's a learning experience for me as much as it is, you know, trying to provide any sort of knowledge and help for Team Canada. But I'm very, very fortunate.
That must be amazing for people who are like not professional athletes or into boxing or at Olympic level to come to your class, and they're like, this guy is coaching like these top level athletes who are performing internationally.
Right.
And are people intimidated when they come to your class?
I
and
don't
they're
think
just
so.
like,
I don't think they're intimidated, but it's a very different type of class. And I only coach Equinox one day a week. You know,
but you were also doing like the boot camps or like the boxing.
Yeah,
stuff.
I do a lot. I work in a couple of studios, and I run my own like technical sessions and boot camps and things like that aren't really related to competitive coaching. But yeah, I don't think people are intimidated really. You know, maybe initially. I'm not sure. But very, very quickly, it's really about learning the fundamentals of the sport and how you communicate, and you know, how you present yourself to people. And I think putting people at ease is maybe, you know, something that's part of being a good coach. Communicating is definitely part of being a good coach, and I think people very quickly kind of see what it's all about. And with, you know, Wednesday nights at Equinox, for example, no competitive athletes, but always very, very busy, and we see the same faces because they enjoy learning. So it's pretty cool.
Very cool. So when you were traveling representing Kingdom of Bahrain, that was as an athlete, not as a coach?
No, it was as a coach.
It was as a coach.
Yes.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of those experiences, like getting to represent like your country, because like your dad's from Bahrain.
Dad is from Bahrain,
and he must be so proud of you.
I think so. You know, obviously, I mean, you'll know this. You know, brown parents. You know, quitting, a law career to go into coaching was a little bit controversial for my family. So
You're
which,
did you get hit him?
well, probably, yeah. My dad always, he's always kind of been a little bit. He suspected I got hit in the head a couple of times. Yeah, initially maybe they weren't incredibly supportive or understanding. From my dad's side, anyway. My mum's a different story. She's always supported me, and my dad has as well, for the record. But I'm sure, yeah, obviously, when you get to represent your nation, and when you get to, see people succeed from your country on the international stage, it's a very, very proud moment, and it's amazing to be able to also do it, with Canada, even in the smallest capacity. I got to work with another amazing coach this year, and we got selected as the kind of duo coaching team for Canada versus USA in the summer, which is a massive honor. And like when the national anthem came on, and on the first of the 2 days of competition, it was kind of sobering for me. I was like, oh my God, like I'm representing my kind of new nation. It was a super proud moment, and my family are proud and supportive as well, I think. So
you're just cool. A global nomad, like living in
I've been around the world. I've been lucky.
You take your time in many different countries.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you were like a competitive athlete earlier. You were a lawyer, and then you went into coaching directly. And and then wow! And before that, were you
into coaching?
And before that, were you? Like competing as a boxer? Like
I competed for a few years. I never hit any sort of heights as a boxer. I competed in soccer and track, which I was a lot more successful in. Had a scholarship to study and play soccer competitively for a few years in Europe, and that was very, very cool. And I ran track at Edinburgh, and that was very, very cool. And but boxing was always like the thing I was kind of most passionate about. And going into coaching, coaching's an interesting thing, it's
because that's such an interesting decision that versus being back, and that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, when did you make this decision that this is what I'm gonna do? I'm not gonna be doing that, but I'm gonna coach these athletes who are gonna be performing at that level.
Well, I didn't initially start at this level, to be fair. I worked with a couple of athletes who wanted to learn how to box. They're like, I want to learn how to box, and at that time, it was 2015, I believe, in Bahrain. There was no boxing. So I started the Kingdom's first boxing club.
Oh wow!
Bahrain Boxing Club.
Okay.
Which no longer exists, sadly, anymore, because of COVID and me moving here. We had to kind of sadly close it down. But we had 3 or 4 young gentlemen who came in and said, I want to learn how to box. I'm like, well, I know a little bit about boxing. I've boxed before. I mean, a little bit. I've been involved in sport for a few years, so like I knew enough, but I was a junior coach, and I was like, well, sure, I'll help you out. And we both grew, my athletes and my knowledge of coaching kind of grew at the same time, and working with other coaches who came into Bahrain and traveling, and myself going off to travel around Europe and learn from coaches just in gyms, and you build your knowledge and you study the game a lot, and those athletes actually now all represent Bahrain at the highest level, and it was very, very cool actually. Like, my debut as a coach was with one of the athletes who I started with from day one. We were at the Eindhoven Cup in Holland last April together, and that was a very, very cool moment, for me to make my debut for the national team as a coach, and his as an athlete when we both started, really kind of from on the ground level. So the story and the arc's actually been kind of cool, and to see these guys. I mean, I talk to them every day. One of them's just turned pro. So he's just signed a pro contract. The other one is in Spain right now, competing on the international stage. So we have a very deep bond, and it's nice to see our kind of art kind of rise together at the same time in the same sport, but very, very differently.
That's amazing, and to see someone that you helped has grown to that level.
And they helped me, for the record. It's very mutual.
Yeah, of course, and I'm sure you're getting a lot out of that. You had also mentioned that you owned a few gyms, like on the Sunshine Coast.
Yes, I lived on the Sunshine Coast, and we actually owned 3 at the time that COVID was coming in. We were planning a 4th, and sadly we were working on a franchise model, and we had a pretty successful business model for a few years, and sadly COVID, made that untenable, and we had to kind of pivot. And by the time that COVID kind of tapered off, and gyms were starting back up again, it was hard to kind of get back into that. And at that point, I had chosen like a pathway into high performance coaching and working almost exclusively with competitive athletes. So my focus changed a little bit, and I noticed very quickly, actually, I was like, I'm getting involved in the commercial side of things again. I'm not coaching as much, I'm running businesses now. So COVID in a way was a blessing as much as it was a curse for many people and myself. And it gave me more space and time to kind of really focus on my craft and take a couple of steps back to go to the fundamentals of why I fell in love with coaching and teaching, rather than trying to monetize the sport. So yeah, it was interesting.
It takes time to decide that, right? And sometimes it can be challenging, because even for me in my work, like as artists, as camera operator Julian over there, when you're living the freelance life, it's trusting the universe, trusting that your work is going to be seen, appreciated, valued, and making a living. But at the same time, like going after what truly gets your heart pumping.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how many athletes are you traveling with to Italy?
I'm not traveling with any like my personal athletes to Italy, but there will be, I think, 16 in total from Canada, and there's 2 from British Columbia, which is amazing. They have an amazing opportunity to qualify. But these are, and even the other athletes on the national team are most of whom I've met before, I've worked with before. Last February was actually the first time I cornered for Team Canada, and that individual, I've worked with him a few times now, and again with the Canadian national team, I'm kind of very on the low end of things. Any opportunity that can come up, even if it's for the briefest of moments, to be involved is an honor.
It's an honor.
Yeah, like, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I'm quite young for a coach. I'm at 39. You're still learning, and Canada's got some incredible coaches and some amazing knowledge. An amazing knowledge base within those coaches. So just to have access to them myself from a personal level is amazing.
And the fact you've been here for a couple of years, and then you're getting to go with the Olympics.
Very lucky. Very fortunate. Very lucky.
Take a moment, take stock of what's happening here.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Mixed in COVID in there, so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm not in the field of boxing, but I've done boxer fit classes, but I'm sure if anyone out there who's watching, I know Julian's really into martial arts, he's really into boxing and all the other things. What advice would you give to someone who's wanting to get into the sport?
Take your time to pick a gym. Take your time to pick a gym that has coaches who can communicate well, who have a decent understanding of the sport, and that it's an environment that you're comfortable with. I was at a seminar recently, a coaching seminar, and the 2 most intimidating places to walk into are tattoo parlors and boxing gyms, apparently. I don't know how they, what kind of qualitative data it got to that conclusion, but apparently those are the 2 most intimidating places to walk into. So, people sometimes...
Is it because they're so intense and you imagine that
I think it's the violence, and I think it's the culture, the misunderstood culture around boxing, that you're going to a place that's violent, that's intimidating, that people are, probably, volatile, but actually boxing gyms are the very opposite of that. There's a culture of respect, there's a code of, being welcoming, there's a lot of humility, because, in boxing you can get humbled very quickly, competitively. So everybody, at least if they're not naturally humble, will at least be humble, because you never know when it's your turn. So my advice is to pick a good gym, do a little bit of research, and just go for it, and enjoy it, and learn the fundamentals from a coach who can communicate well, and see it as learning a craft and an art, rather than legalized violence as such. It's the culture around it's amazing, and the camaraderie and the friendships relationships you can garner and develop are pretty special in boxing.
So most of these guys who are going, they must be quite young, like early 20s.
People,
teens?
you know, early 20s, early to mid 20s is the average age, but it goes up to about 34, 35 years old. A couple of athletes are in that kind of age bracket for the national team. But I've heard of people starting boxing in their kind of mid 20s and having quite a lot of success, for 5 or 6 years. It's a very challenging sport. If you're a competitive boxer or a competitive coach, you're devoting a lot of your time and a lot of your life to learning, to pursuing, to taking failure and success as they come and growing with that. It's a lonely sport. It's a very cruel sport in the sense that there's always one winner and one loser, and you can work so hard and you can always be very close to success but never really make it. It's that's true for a lot of solo sports as well. Solo-based sports are usually the kind of cruelest to lose at and the best to win at. So with Italy, for example, there's a kind of decent age range that are going. So
I've had a few athletes on the show, like BC Lions, captain of Whitecaps, Jada Merritt.
Right.
He's American, and he would talk a lot about when he was playing in the UK in the World Cup, representing US, that he had this eye surgery that was needed like a couple of weeks before, I would say 8 weeks before. But so much of that is beyond just training the body, but it's also training the mind.
Absolutely.
I'm super into listening to podcasts and listening to athletes who are retired or existing, like they're still performing, because so much of it is the mindset.
Absolutely.
You can train your body, and I think when you listen to some of those interviews, like whether someone's a housewife or an artist or an entrepreneur, you can take something from it, because what's happening in here, your body can be super sharp.
Absolutely. No, so with boxing specifically.
So do you train people? What sort of insight or advice do you give to when you're coaching, when people come to you? What do you suggest to them?
It's actually a really good question, and it's something that's discussed a lot now in the kind of modern phase and state of coaching in boxing. And somebody, recently I was at a coach's clinic in Montreal at the Olympic Training Center with some of the most amazing coaches in Canada. Just to be around those guys was amazing, and listening to a few things. And we had a sports psychologist come in and talk to us for a couple of hours about sports psychology and the emotional and cognitive prep for boxing. Boxing sits at about 65 to 70% cognitive and emotional prep to 30% physical. So if you're not conditioned to handle controlled aggression, to handle your emotions in the ring, say if you're kind of down for a few moments, or you've been struck and you have to recover, if you're not conditioned emotionally to maintain your training and to understand that, say you have a setback and how you recover from that in a camp leading up to a fight or a tournament, then you won't have success. And I've worked with some incredibly talented athletes, who just are naturals at the sport, and physical specimens, and they often are at that very thin margin of success failure in boxing because their emotional and their cognitive control isn't there. So part of being a modern coach, part of being kind of new, coaching nowadays is really prepping your athlete mentally and understanding each athlete has a very, very different bespoke way of being spoken to, being praised, being criticized, being taught, being consoled, after a loss, for example, or if you're in the corner, mid fight, how you communicate to them and how you get them to respond, or just approaching into a fight and their emotional state. Then there are so many different stages of emotional and cognitive application in boxing, pre, during, and post, that are so intricate and sensitive. As a coach, I spend most of my time calming people, reassuring people, communicating, people's positivity, than I do actually coaching them, technically. So It's a very cognitive and emotional sport.
It's almost like when you're describing it, it's like a therapist.
Yeah, I am a therapist, actually.
Yeah.
Even for my non-competitive clients, sometimes people just pay me per hour to just come and talk to me about their day, and I'm like, oh, do you want to do some boxing? But yeah, no, you're right. Actually, there's something I hear a lot, like, oh man, you're kind of like a therapist, and I guess maybe there is a kind of primal catharsis to boxing.
Well, obviously, like I did this like long time ago. I was in this like boxer fit class. I was 17 when I moved to Canada, and I wanted to travel, so I was like, okay, I'm going to join the Canadian military.
Okay, interesting.
I could not do a push-up for the life of me.
Right.
Like, forget about it. And I think to get into the reserves, because that's what I was applying for, you needed to do 20 push-ups.
Okay.
And
which is hard for anyone. To be honest. 20 push-ups is not easy.
Anyways, so I was like dead set on this is what I'm gonna do. So I was doing these boxer fit, and I had a personal trainer. I'm like 18 years old, and I remember getting into like working on the bag like a couple of days a week. Anything that was happening in my personal life, I could just release that. I mean, secondly, I got really shredded. I remember the lowest I was like 8% body fat,
wow.
which is kind of like scary.
Yeah.
But it was just it was almost addictive. Like I couldn't, you just release everything. Like you surrender to the process, and you release in this class, which was like 90 minutes,
yes.
which was like a therapy. And like all of us would go through this transformation of, physical transformation, but also like emotional as you're doing this, for someone who wants to do it just for fun and just for fitness. But I can see that how it can be so therapeutic.
Absolutely.
And how that as a coach, like how you would have to be present, because especially when you're working with people at that level who are competing,
yes, absolutely,
to represent their country.
Yeah.
And then you're traveling. Like, I'll tell you, like this morning we had some very exciting guests. Julian knows I'm very always like, everything's good, it's all good, it's all good. I didn't get much sleep last night. My nerves are just like, I'm trying to, and he's like, it's okay. Julian's like taking care of everything over here. I'm like, he's like, breathe. I'm like, yes, it's going to be great. And the show was great. We got emotional. It's been a very exciting day of filming. Amazing. For us. But I think that there's so much of when the stakes are high, when you're representing, yes. When you have to travel and you have to be on and like trusting your body, yes. trusting your mind. Absolutely. So much of that. So I would love to hear some of those stories when it comes to like eating, sleeping habits that you teach for example, when you were in Bahrain, when you were coaching these folks and you're traveling around, that's a lot of stress and pressure.
It is indeed.
No matter how much you train.
Absolutely. And as much as I say, like I'm there to try and help my athlete prepare before a fight and make sure they're emotionally, level and, cognitively sharp. I'm actually just as nervous. I'm just as afraid, my first job, I guess, or the first aspect of my work is athlete safety, for example, and boxing is a dangerous sport. So, ensuring that they go in there and, are able to, be competitive, but also be safe is, something that's always on my mind. And then their success, I'm very invested in each athlete's success. I'm very invested in their journey and their story. So, wanting them to be successful puts a lot of pressure on me. So, being able to be physically fit, but also emotionally fit, I guess, for want of a better term, as a coach, especially, in kind of new age coaching and understanding, the different pathways and the different methods of application to become a successful coach. Which I'm still learning, by the way, is key. And I try to live my life as an athlete. I'm sober. I eat well. I get 9 hours sleep. I do all the things that I need to do to prep my body to be able to coach, to hold mitts, to run with my athletes, to travel. As much as I try, there's only so much you can do, and I guess surrendering and submitting as well, just like athletes do, to the success-failure ratio is the same as a coach. You prep your athlete the best you can, you prep yourself and educate yourself the best you can to be able to be present for your athlete, and then you just have to submit, and whatever happens, and it's over in what feels like a matter of seconds. practicing what you preach in boxing, I think at the highest level is key. And I think it garners a lot of respect and trust from your athlete.
Because sometimes I've seen coaches, I mean, I haven't followed the sport that much, but I have, like, when it comes to Olympics, like I'll watch, I've been to some MMA fights long time ago, not boxing.
Sure.
But I find it fascinating, like the guy who's in the ring, he's just, you know, like looking like this, super fit. The guys who are on their team, not so much.
Sure. I mean, I guess it depends how old the coaches are as well. You know, sometimes, you know, you've got coaches coaching into their 80s, you know, and at that point, really, it's not really about, you know.
But it sounds like you're very passionate about the sport, like, and I'm sure that's why they respect you more, because you're also into that fitness and doing the same things that you're.
Sure. I mean, there are different types of coaches, and you know, it's about finding the right fit. You know, some athletes would come work with me and it wouldn't be a good fit. Some athletes do, and it is. You know, and some you know want, you know, a coach who's older and, you know, a little bit, you know, kind of more experienced, you know, with the number of years that they've been in the sport, but maybe they can't necessarily do all the things that say, for example, I do. So it's about finding the right fit, you know, for athlete and coach, and sometimes it takes a while actually to see how it works. I've worked with some athletes and it's just not worked out, you know, and you kind of shake hands and you give them a hug and you're like, you know, all the best, you know. Finding another coach is probably the thing that you should do. So it's about finding the right fit. But you're right, you know, some of these coaches, although maybe they don't look like they're athletes, their knowledge is incredible. And they've been in the game like 40, 50, 60 years.
Judgment.
No, it's definitely not judgment. It's definitely not judgment. It's just different types, different strokes.
Yeah.
You know, so. But it's at one point I think maybe they were they were, you know, looking like they're athletes. So
what are some interesting? I'm sure, like, for example, like from movies, like, you know, the stuff that I've learned that don't do this before you have to fight, don't eat or fast or drink this much water. Share with our viewers and with me some interesting things that you suggest to your clients, to the individuals you're coaching when they're competing internationally.
Well, I mean,
that, you know, I'm sure our audience would be like excited to hear.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're competing internationally or locally, you know, the same fundamentals apply. The same fundamentals of preparation apply. You know, for example, boxing is a weight-based sport, so making sure you're on weight is key. You know, I've seen very talented, very successful boxers, you know, pick certain weight divisions, for example. You know, tactically, well, if I enter this tournament at this weight class, I'll have a greater chance of success of winning. So your weight management is key. So, and sometimes people start to cut their weight a little bit too close to the event, and it saps them of energy, and it makes them mentally drained, and they can't sleep, and your body's in deficit, and it's hard they're cranky, and they're not coachable, and they're not responsive. So, you know, approaching your weight management is key. And in boxing, there are you know, three things: you're technical, you're physical, and you're emotional. Those are the three kind of areas that a boxer is responsible for. And then there's a tactical, which is like, you know, a shared responsibility between the coach and the boxer. And I think preparing for those three fundamentals from a boxing perspective, that your emotional control is there, that sports psychology is applied. I always recommend, actually, to a lot of my boxers, I've recommended them speaking to sports psychologists, and they'll literally get on the phone. You call, there's a couple of people that are available, you know, that have worked with, you know, the highest levels of athletes and the highest levels of sport, that will, you know, talk to an athlete to help them prep emotionally and mentally for a fight. And then there's the physical prep. You know, you got to do your training in the gym, you got to get out and run and get your strength and conditioning, you know, right, and get your sleep right, get your diet right. And once all those elements are in
what
place,
does training look like? Is it like training 6-7 days a week?
6-7 days a week.
Is it like cardio?
There's a lot. It's very cardiovascular demanding as a sport. So, you know, people are doing double and triple sessions.
In my brain, I think of Rocky. Like, as
it's kind of like Rocky, a little bit. some elements of it are definitely. I mean,
Sorry, Hollywood brain.
yeah. Don't forget, rugby was from the kind of 80s and 90s,
Yeah.
so like training methodology has changed since then. No, but you know, if you want to be a high performance athlete, you know, it is your lifestyle. It is your life. So people are, you know, they're doing their strength conditioning or their cardiovascular training in the morning, and then they're doing their technical training in the afternoon, and then going home and then coming back in and doing, you know, more training. So sometimes it's 2 or 3 sessions a day.
Oh wow.
6 days a week.
Okay.
You know? Yeah. So it's, you know, you're putting your body through a lot. You know, and if you want that chance of very, very slim success, you have to be ahead of your opponents, and you know, and as a coach, you got to make sure that your athlete isn't overtraining and is preparing in the right way and is doing the right training. You know, sometimes people are, I'm going to go for a 10K run, coach. I'm like, well, you're only boxing for 3 rounds as an amateur, 3-minute rounds. So you're using a very different energy system. So, you know, convincing them to maybe not go for a 10K run and do hill sprints instead, you know, to try and, you know, communicate the pertinence of the type of training that they're doing is really important. So, but then also as a coach, learning what the most pertinent, you know, what the most applicable type of training is also key. And, you know, there's a saying, you know, like boxing also is a solo sport. It's won by a team of people, you know, and I work closely with strength and conditioning coaches, with sports psychologists, with, you know, with technical officers, you know, with a lot of different people to prepare one boxer for one event. So it's very much a team sport, and having a good team is great.
And where do you do your training?
So I work out of a gym on Broadway.
Okay.
But I work with Team BC as well, and I go to different gyms. And then if we're with the national team, it's at the Olympic Training Centre in Montreal. Yeah, I travel around a lot. I don't have my own gym anymore. But I have a space that I coach people with, and I've worked with some amazing coaches here. I've learned a lot from, and
You don't have your own gym, but you're like traveling around the world doing very, very exciting things and working with people who are playing at that. It sounds like it requires a lot of discipline in your life, like especially when you're training 3 times a day.
Yes, as an athlete?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, discipline is if you're not disciplined, you won't be successful with the sport. That's the bottom line. You know, you're either completely...
This is not like a Friday, Saturday night out business.
No. You know, like I played soccer to a decent level in Europe, and you can get away with certain things with your training, certain things with, you know, your strength and conditioning or your technical training or whatever it is, or, you know, but with boxing, like the margin of success is so fine anyway. It's so narrow that if you're not really pushing and really maintaining your discipline and really ensuring your consistency is there, you're not going to have the success. You just won't, you know, and the thing with boxing is controlling the elements that are within your control, and working hard is one of them. You know, you can't control really ultimately what your opponent does or what the subjective nature of judging in boxing is going to be like, say if it comes to a decision for the judges. You can't control those things, but controlling all the elements that you can is key. And there are many, and if you apply those elements really, really well, you can have a greater chance of success. But even still, you know, there's such a slim chance of, you know, for example, even just qualifying for the qualifier is very difficult. You know, the first qualifier was in June for Canada, and then we had another one in December, and that's just to pick the people who would represent Canada at the Pan American Games.
Oh wow!
And then you go to the Pan American Games and you have to win there, or in some way come silver, to be able to then just have a chance at the World qualifiers, say in Italy and in Bangkok, the second phase in June.
And making sure you're not getting injured in between.
Injuries like happen.
No head injuries.
Head injuries, eye injuries, cuts.
Yeah.
So there's the maintenance of that, and that falls under what you just talked about, which is discipline and consistency. So, you know, the margins of success are so small. So making sure you're consistent is key.
From your eyes, because you're so in there, who do you think, what kind of people are, because I feel the fact that you can have this physical injury to your body and you're risking that, but you're also so passionate about this contact sport, which can cause injury to someone else as well as to you. Sure. In your experience, what type of people do you think are mostly drawn to this? Because you have to have a mindset. And then you mentioned the emotional aspect, especially when you get angry. You have to be able to control that in there. So at one point, you're, you have to get your opponent down, but at the same time, keep your emotions in check.
Absolutely. You know what? Boxing attracts all types of people. I've seen all different personality types, all different character types, people from different backgrounds. It's an amazing sport in that respect. And I think just like anything is learning. You as an athlete, you learn how to control, you learn how to maintain, you learn how to retain. And it's about, the coaching that you have. The very, very talented, successful people have this kind of X factor within them, this drive to success, this focus. They have luck on their side as well, which is a lot to do with it, but ultimately the one persistent factor is doing the things that everybody can do, and that is making sure that hard work is the only way to success, and part of that is learning how to control yourself, and that's if you've got a good coach, you've got a good a team behind you, you'll develop that education. So
are there any like books or documentaries or like journeys of athletes that you recommend, like when you're coaching your people? Like I find like as a performer, as an artist, like I'm always encouraged to like by my teachers like study other people, like listen to biographies and see like not just in your field but in other fields, and because as an actor, as a performer, you're gonna have to end up playing maybe one of those characters. Like I know I keep talking about the movies, but one of my favorites was $1 Million Baby with Hilary Swank, and it's sadly based on
movie.
Very sad,
but great movie. Great story,
and based on a true story as well. But some of the things that you were saying, like I'm just imagining, like when I imagine female boxers, I think you'd mentioned you work with female boxers as well.
Yeah, very lucky to work with female boxers on all levels. It's very interesting, working with some of the most talented females in the country. Seeing their mental and emotional fortitude and their passion for the sport is incredible. I mean, I think as an athlete, regardless of what gender you are or where you're at, and you're kind of if you're provincial or national or international, I think immersion is key, and being very involved in all aspects of the sport is key, and reading books of coaches from all sports, and looking at athletes from all different types of sports who have had success.
Are there any particular that you recommend?
Put me on the spot, honestly. I can't really think of any right now. I got a bit of a kind of brain fog. I'll probably come back to me in a second, but there are lots of different sources and resources that you can hear and listen to. Lots of podcasts from different athletes and across different cycling and diving and swimming, like solo sports are definitely things that I tell people that you should look into how these athletes prepare.
I have a book sitting here. If you want, I can give it to you afterwards. I had this show that I was doing last year. This lady, she was a soldier. Controversial. We'll talk about it off camera. But she decided what can she do? So she got into cycling. And now she's in her mid-50s. She's had so many intense injuries.
Right.
Like broken face, and then she's still on the road.
Sure.
She's 56.
Sure.
She's like on the road, like training, and I'm just like, wow. And I heard her story as a keynote speech last spring, and I was so fascinated. I'm like, wow. And she just falls, and she's proudly showing she lost all her teeth, and she fell. She could have died. She could have been unalive. She went through all of this, but there's something inside of her spirit that she wants to keep taking it to the next level and see how far she can take it. How far she can go. Her book is called No Limits, and I found that very inspiring. That it's really in your brain, and yes, you're 56 now, but you're taking it to the next level. And she I think it was a triathlon championship, like across the U.S. She placed first.
Yeah.
After that injury,
Amazing.
where she could have, it could have cost her life.
Absolutely, and boxing is a sport where it's not very common, but people get very, very injured, and once every few years somebody dies actually, from the sport. But if you're passionate about something and you want and you enjoy something so much, the sacrifices are easy to make, and I find that athletes that I've studied and coaches that I've studied and athletes that I've worked with, it's very easy to see how people respond from things, where they're going to go in their career, and it's a very thin line and fine line of people that will respond, say from an adverse occasion in the sport, for example, like falling off your bike and breaking your teeth or whatever, and boxing, maybe getting knocked out or being very badly injured, and how you respond from that, and to get back into the sport, you can see who's going to be successful and who's maybe going to struggle a little bit for success very, very quickly. So the people who are the most successful, I guess, have this natural capacity and capability to tap into their passion, to be persistent. So,
no matter what.
no matter what.
Tell me about soccer.
Yes.
Soccer, football. I'm just like, depends on what country you're in, where you are.
So if I'm in Europe, it's football.
Yeah.
But here, it's soccer.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to have a nice youth career with some professional teams in England and Scotland, and I was lucky enough for them I attended a kind of school where sports was kind of the drive of the school, and I had an athletic scholarship to that school to play soccer. I played for some kind of youth teams of some like pro development youth teams for pro teams. I didn't quite make it as a pro, but again, the margins of success to become a successful professional athlete or high performance athlete are very slim. But I got a good education out of it. I got, I played over in Germany, and I had a trial for a team in Germany and in England and in Scotland, and it was a very cool part of my life, and a lot of the things I learned there, I employ now and today in my life and in coaching, and it's something I'm very, very passionate about. I'm a keen fan, it was a big part of my life. And I actually coach a women's team. I haven't for the last couple of months, but and it's a women's youth team. So I coach loosely with a couple of other coaches. I help out here and there. And
here
in Vancouver.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
And I love the sport. It's an incredible sport, and it's an incredible culture. And I think being around sports and being around competitive people is just kind of what I enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm. And there's something so special what happens whether you're, doing something so simple as like walking or hiking or going to a boxing class or, joining, deciding to push yourself and being like, okay, maybe I will learn soccer or tennis or squash. When you move your body and you move your energy. And I think that was something like during COVID, we all started talking about mental health a lot.
Yes.
Because when people were stuck inside their homes,
Absolutely.
First we're decorating our homes, we're baking, and then
sourdough.
yeah.
In COVID.
Oh my God! For a second there, I was living in another place in Yaletown, and on the 22nd floor, and just baking and eating, and I'm just sitting at home and just like eating, and I'm like, okay, pants are fitting a little tighter. We need to, get outside other than watching Netflix.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure you must get so much out of coaching people, whether it is professionally or, people when you're teaching gym classes
Absolutely.
or personal training and, the football, women's football that you're coaching, because at the end of it, knowing that you move your body, you get to use your instrument. I know for me, whenever I'm like in sort of like a fog or having a day, I'll grab my dog, I'll grab Loki, and I'll be like, we're just going a little walk. And then next thing I know, I'm on second or third beach and it's like 10, 12K. And just that movement, or if I'm doing weight training or yoga, but sometimes you have to trick yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Into like, and then afterwards you just feel so incredible. Like, I know for someone like you, that's probably, you're like, yes, I know that. But for other people, or people who are like non-athletes,
Sure.
you know, this amazing, the fact that we can give ourselves that natural high.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I think being able to move your body in any way is a blessing. You know, for example, right now, you know, I'm maybe not moving my body personally in the way that I usually enjoy. You know, just coming out of feeling a little bit poorly for a couple of weeks, and you know, the importance. You know, we are creatures designed to move and to be active. We have bodies that respond very positively to sport and recreation. You know, moving yourself in whatever way that looks like. It doesn't always have to be training to compete. It can be walking, it can be stretching, it can be yoga. You know, it can and I think moving your body in a way that you enjoy triggers that aspect emotionally and mentally, that kind of part of your brain that, you know, delivers dopamine, you know, to your body is key. And finding what you enjoy sometimes takes a while. And then also just doing what you can when you can. You know, every little bit counts, every little bit helps. It doesn't always have to be a 15K run. It can be a 1K walk. And, you know, I'm nearly 40 years old, and I'm only just starting to really learn this myself. And you know, as an ex-competitive athlete, it's always like, oh, I'm training. Whereas now, you know, I'm like, oh, well, not everything has to be training. You know, like I'm going to go move my body. You know, and I have friends who are.
You can take the stairs at 54.
I'll take them down, maybe. I've had friends who are personal trainers, and they learning from them in the last year and a half, actually, of actually, you know, having relevance and seeing where you're at a given time, and just, you know, making sure that you're giving yourself a little bit of grace, and understanding that your body is going to be different in different stages in your life, and continuing to make sure that you're moving it is key.
Yeah, the fact that it's going to be different stages, I feel that it's so fascinating. I will have periods of I'm like, okay, I'm not doing anything, a lot of like computer work, because other than on camera, you have a lot of pre and post production. You're doing a lot of emails and meetings and Zooms and such, and then I'll be like, oh yes, the gym, yeah, I need to work out. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna do this every day. Then I'm just like then I'm pulling a muscle, and that happens to me often in December.
Right.
Because it's all of a sudden the temperatures drop. Like it happened to me this December and last, and I'm like, oh yes, feeling like an old lady.
You know, and adjusting, but just, you know, moving your body in any way is key. And your body's so grateful for it, you know, and yeah, I guess my advice to people is do what you can when you can, even the kind of most minute amount of movement. Your body is super grateful, and your mind is then therefore super grateful too.
So other than Equinox, where people who are non-professional athletes who want to get into boxing, where can we find you?
I coach out of a studio in just off Granville Bridge there, and VIP Fitness, and then I have a private studio that I work with. Instagram is, I guess, the best way to kind of find me and contact me.
And I guess in summertime you were doing outdoor.
If people want to be outside in the summer, which a lot of my clients
which
do.
I think is such a great idea.
It's great. You know, Vancouver in the summer is beautiful, and you get that vitamin D from the sun, and yeah, I'm either at a couple of different studios or I'm outdoors.
And that's a great way to promote, because people are just walking by. They're like, oh, what's happening over here?
Yeah, I got a lot of clients this summer just like, what are you doing here? You know, you know, and yeah, it's a great way to kind of you know, I guess promote yourself. But yeah, I work out of a couple of gyms and then a couple of private studios. So.
What do you do for your own self-care? Because it sounds like you're giving a lot of energy out, you know, working with people.
Running is my love. You know, I love to run. I run every day, even if it's 1K, I'll go for a run. You know, and then, you know, obviously my strength and conditioning has got to be key for me to be able to do my job the way I do it. And then eating and sleeping correctly, and just, you know, making sure that you respect your body. And if you do, your body will pay you back in dividends. So yeah, that's what I do.
We just got a couple more minutes to go. I know you have to run off somewhere. We love to hear if you have a favorite spot in Vancouver. The show is called On Location. A location you like to go to unwind, get inspired, whether it's a cafe or a gallery or somewhere outdoors that you'd like to share with us?
For me, my favorite spot over the years consistently has been the seawall in Stanley Park. You know, we're very, very blessed to live in a very, very cool a very cool city, you know, and having nature around us is key, and I love getting out into nature when I can. I don't do it enough. I wish I could do it more, but getting on that seawall and being in Stanley Park is actually my favorite part. There's no specific gym or studio that I can say like I'm most at home at. Being outside is, and no matter the weather, is key.
Yeah, you know, and especially when it's snowing, if you go like in the morning or
It's beautiful.
yeah, like I took Loki out. There's barely anyone.
Yep.
And I'm like, this is amazing. I can let him loose.
Yep.
He can run around, do his thing. And we're walking all the way to Third Beach.
Yep.
It's just, it looks so, so beautiful.
Yeah.
Where do you draw inspiration from?
It's a really good question. I think my peers, you know, is the first thing, you know, and looking at other, you know, senior coaches, for example, from a coaching perspective is key. A lot of my inspiration comes from my family. My mum and dad, they've both been very successful in their own rights in their own careers. You know, seeing how they conduct themselves and how they've carried themselves and been successful is massively inspiring for me. And you know, I'm very much an underdog lover. You know, like in seeing how underdogs, you know, come through adversity and all sorts of different parts of life and outside of sport as well has also been, you know, very inspiring for me in many ways. So, you know, but definitely the people closest to me and seeing how they carry themselves and their success has been the most inspiring.
Great. Well, congratulations on your success.
Thank you, Zara. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for making time for us.
Absolutely.
And wishing you all the best in Italy.
Oh, thank you.
I hope you get to enjoy a lot of pasta and get to take in the city a little bit as well. Where in Italy are you guys going exactly?
We'll be in Assisi initially, in central Italy, and then up near just outside Milan for the tournament. So.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Yeah. I almost went to Milan a couple of years ago before the Genoa Bridge collapsed, but on my way to Tuscany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful place.
Well, thank you so much, Tariq.
Thank you.
Wishing you nothing but the success.
Thank
and, you know, we'll be calling you up once you're back, you know, from coaching the pros. And yeah.
Well, it's a small role I play, but, you know, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in to On Location with Zara Durrani, brought to you with the support of TELUS and StoryHive. Until next time.